the concept of horror has preyed on people for a very long time. It lurks way back to ancient times, and I'm pretty sure even cavemen shared tales of a boogeyman hiding in the dark. While the medium has stretched from books to film and especially into gaming, the basis of a good scary tale that's made to linger in your mind late at night pretty much remains consistent. While your preferences to horror might change through its many subgenres, in the end it all boils down to the psychological effects it has on the mind. That changes from person to person, but we can all agree how effective the terror factor is when playing a video game. Even way back in gaming's infancy, there were already titles exploring newfound avenues into terror. Although these visuals might look silly and dated by today's standards, it's the idea that's had a lasting effect. Where a book or film can transport us to terrifying places, you can only ever be an observer. But as gamers we have agency. Choices lead to consequences, and this is how it bleeds so effectively into the psychology of fear. It's this primal emotion that game developers have set out to explore to its fullest. And way back in 2006, the studio of Frictional Games was formed with this exact goal in mind. It started with the development of Penumbra, a first-person survival game that was in many ways the precursor to Amnesia, and it ended up as a trio of titles. The developers also took inspiration from the big guns such as Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and interestingly enough text-based adventures. What attracted them to these text titles was how well the puzzles fit into their environments and made sense in the larger context of the world. By 2008, Frictional looked to break away from Penumbra and try something a little different. A game less driven by its story to lean more into the mechanics side of things. Using their in-house HPL engine, it's easy to see how much Lovecraft was an inspiration to the studio. Throughout development they played around with how light and dark could be explored, as well as an impactful sanity system. All the while the studio was forced to navigate the constraints of a tight budget, so they had to find clever ways to work around it and still make a game as polished as possible. They especially toyed with the idea of adding combat as a last resort form of survival, but found it lackluster when compared to their AAA competitors. Even the game's title was in flux, at a stage being simply known as Unknown, which unsurprisingly proved very unpopular until they finally settled on the much improved Amnesia: The Dark Descent. After an arduous development process and many a financial struggle, the game finally launched in September 2010. The sales steadily piled up, and by 2012 Amnesia had far surpassed 1 million copies sold. The reviews were glowing and players couldn't get enough of the dark, moody atmosphere. Frictional Games had placed themselves firmly on the map. Considering all the meticulous reshaping it took to get the mechanics of the game down, it's no surprise just how well the feel of the game comes across. With no weapons or any form of combat to be seen, you'd imagine that takes away from the game, but in fact it only reinforces your own vulnerability. When monsters are near, your best course of action comes down to keeping quiet while staying in the dark. Easy as that sounds, Amnesia amps up the psychological horror as it plays on one's fear of the dark, and this is where the sanity system comes in. Throughout the levels you'll have limited resources of illumination through lighting candles and the oil in the lantern that you'll be carrying around. However, in the light monsters can easily spot you and dispatch you in a heartbeat. So you'll need to hide from them in whatever dark corners you can find, but your character's frail sanity will drain away in the shadows. This will cause you to hear strange sounds, your vision will start to blur, and you may even see odd shapes, while also losing movement to little more than a crawl, and eventually you may even collapse out of sheer terror. Throughout the game you'll need to strike a balance between the brightness and shadows, while battling your fluctuating sanity, not to mention finding ways to escape the many monsters out to kill you. Now these creatures are out for blood, bashing through doors and giving chase, hunting you relentlessly to make certain your life comes to a swift end. What I appreciate about Amnesia is, as mechanically focused as Frictional Games were during development, they certainly didn't skimp when it came to the plot, and it actually plays quite effectively into the systems of the gameplay. You enter the world of Amnesia, set in Perugia during 1839, where you'll be taking on the role of Daniel. True to the name of the title, he remembers only his name and finds a note to inform him that his memory loss has been self-inflicted. As you explore the gloomy interior of Brennenburg Castle, you'll piece together the horrific tale that has brought Daniel to this point, and of the shady as well as the hapless individuals involved in his bleak past. It's a story about witnessing the depraved horrors around you as much as those that is left to the imagination. From the many grisly accounts that's delivered through notes you'll find scattered along the way, to the shadow entity that stalks you every step towards salvation. There are layers of horror that you'll wade through in this grimly atmospheric game, and it's as much about learning things as it is about facing the unknown. From the satisfying plot through to the thoughtfulness placed into how its mechanics were constructed, and just how well these two blend together, this opening title in the Amnesia series certainly started things off with a pulse-pounding intensity. This is definitely far removed from those action survival titles though, so it might not hook every action junkie who are looking for a supernatural beatdown. However, what it does offer is a compellingly slow build through a somber narrative and careful gameplay that you can't shoot and bash your way through, but instead need to pace yourself to make your way onwards. There are a variety of puzzles worked into the levels. These are definite high points as well, as they're not incredibly hard but still rewarding to piece together as you work your way towards the conclusion in an altogether solid game. If you take a look at the journey frictional games took to ultimately deliver a product that's the culmination of years worth of blood, sweat and tears, you can't help but feel that Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a game worth playing and an experience you'd gladly want to relive whenever you're in the mood for a creepily good time. This is just my take on Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Do you feel the same way or have something extra to add? Let me know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more indie and classic gaming content, feel free to subscribe and take a stab at the like button if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for stopping by everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.